Hello, hi, and dumelang. My name is Kwena Molekoa, and welcome to your favorite podcast on youth development, service delivery, and a lot more. Entrepreneurship and so much more. Today, I have a great guest from the Nelson Mandela Foundation, and it's none other than the amazing Casual Brooks. Casual, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, and thanks for a very generous greeting.
No, man, there's just a lot that you've been doing, and there's just a lot that I can say about you. But I'd rather have you say that about yourself.
Okay, so at the moment I'm the head of Mandela Day at the Nelson Mandela Foundation just for over a year. And I guess the one thing I want to prefix or highlight is the fact that Mandela Day is really focused on, instead of short-term charitable interventions, long-term and sustainable programs where we work with communities as opposed to just giving to communities.
All right. So what are some of the programs that you've had, projects that you've been doing since, for instance, this is Mandela Month, since we could say since the beginning of the year or since the beginning of this month. So what are some of those programs that you've been busy with?
So I guess we can take a step back, and during the COVID-19 pandemic, obviously people lost jobs, salaries were cut, businesses
collapsed.
Collapsed, and people lost businesses. So as a result of that, something as basic and as simple as food became a rare commodity, where people became unaffordable for people. And
became very necessary.
And the foundation then launched what was called Each One Feed One, which was a program whereby over 100,000 people were fed. With grocery packs, basically.
Oh.
But I think that the one key thing or learning that came out of that was, despite the more than 100,000 people fed, more than 25,000 kilometers traveled, the fact is you give someone a food parcel and you leave, and then what next?
That cannot sustain them.
Exactly. And then obviously we had the floods in April 2022 along the east coast of South Africa, particularly in KwaZulu-Natal and the Eastern Cape. 435 people dead in KwaZulu-Natal
Very
alone.
sad.
Many more having lost everything. And again, Each One Feed One was revived, and we fed people. But again, some of those communities that haven't been able to replace their homes are still asking for assistance. So we realized that we really need a long-term and sustainable approach in our interventions. And I think, if going back to those April 2022 floods, is that global climate change is no longer an issue that is, a problem in the future.
It's a problem right now.
Exactly. 2 weeks ago it snowed in Joburg. And I'm feeling quite warm despite the jersey today. Also, we had a tornado less than a month ago.
That's just a lot that's happening.
So it shows that global climate change is an actual issue. And more importantly, climate change impacts our food security.
True.
What very few people know is they might understand inflation.
Yes.
And the perpetual increase in prices. But what people don't know is, or what very few people recognize, maybe apart from seeing what happens at the till, is that food inflation is double that of ordinary inflation. So again, food is at risk. So you have two factors: climate change on the one hand,
food security,
and food security. And those two intersect, because the more it rains, the more droughts you have. The more flooding, rather. The more droughts you have on the other hand, the less likely you're able to grow food. So we're trying to solve that particular problem by capacitating community food gardens, home-based food gardens, and planting as many trees as possible, 60% of which are fruit trees.
Oh, that's really amazing. I think that even takes us to the theme for this year's Nelson Mandela Day, of which I think it's food security, climate, and...
climate, food, and solidarity.
Oh, climate, food, and solidarity.
Yeah, exactly. That is the theme for this year. And the call to action is, it is in your hands.
It is in your hands.
And I think both of those then combine into the fact that we work with communities and not on behalf of
communities.
I think the approach, that's why we don't have a charitable approach, for lack of a better term. It is working with communities. As I said from the onset, you can't just go into a community and say deliver food or paint a school.
And then you're just done with it.
The community needs to take action, and what better way but for, once you've planted those things, you can't just leave it there.
They need to be watered. So the UN declares the 18th of July International Mandela Day. What does that speak of?
Well, I think it's really significant. So I think we need to understand the context of it. So It's a story that I've heard on a couple of occasions where in 1999 we know that Nelson Mandela finishes his presidency.
Yes.
But
which was one term.
One term. and did amazing work in that term. Voluntarily stepped down, gave an opportunity for others to lead. But interestingly enough, the legend or the story goes that he kept on calling people, and giving them instructions, and wanting to continue the work. And that's really the origins of the foundation itself. And so that's how he starts the foundation, because basically he was told, listen, you're not the president anymore. You can't give us instructions. And so he said, okay, fine, I'll start my own foundation and continue
doing the work.
Which is actually quite amazing. But I mean, fast forward later, a couple of years later, in 2008, or rather 2009, in November, the UN General Assembly declares Nelson Mandela International Day, which was going to be celebrated or commemorated on his birthday, which is the 18th of July.
Okay.
So in 2010, we had our first Nelson Mandela International Day.
Oh.
And I think it's very significant because, as I said, the General Assembly. So in November 2009, the United Nations General Assembly passes a resolution declaring Nelson Mandela's birthday, the 18th of July, as Nelson Mandela International Day. And I think that's an extremely significant moment.
True.
Considering that the UN declares a number of international days to highlight important events,
figures, and
important moments actually in our history where we can make a change. A good example, for example, is World AIDS Day.
True.
And that was to try to eliminate and deal with the AIDS crisis that we had.
Even the stigma around
today.
it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that is the importance of Mandela Day. So in 2010, that's when we had our first Nelson Mandela International Day.
I think that was a very significant year, the year of Madiba Magic.
The World Cup came here. And so exactly, it ties together beautifully, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
Because, that was then. So ultimately, that first Mandela Day was really centered around the idea of, Mandela Day initially was really centered around doing good within your community, because I think we should also prefix the fact that Madiba at the time gave us the specific instruction globally that we shouldn't celebrate his birthday.
It shouldn't be a holiday.
It shouldn't be a holiday, and it shouldn't be a big celebration, a big party, but that we should rather work in our communities. Now, in terms of the specificity of what he meant by working in your communities, I mean, he had a vision for the world.
True.
But I mean, it was short-term interventions and sort of charitable works that we saw from corporates, from government, from NGOs, from ordinary people.
Ordinary people as well.
And really at the foundation, the Nelson Mandela Foundation is the head of Mandela Day. Our approach is really to look at long-term and sustainable impact, to create that world that Madiba dreamt of.
Oh, that's nice. And some of the projects that you guys have been pushing since then, since the day the Nelson Mandela Day became, and to this day and going forward, what are some of those?
I mean, first and foremost, I have to recognize the fact that there's many partners that's still doing a lot of work, providing that immediate relief that people need, all the way from providing food,
from food parcels,
distributing food, collecting blankets, etc., etc. And as I said, our focus at the foundation is now really and I think the one thing that I want to prefix and say is that immediate responses, immediate assistance will always be needed.
Absolutely.
As I said, that we focus on community home-based gardens as well as food gardens, and tree planting. And if someone is hungry now, you can't
you can't say wait for
a month or two, if not 3 months before you can enjoy.
They're hungry now. They need food right now.
So I think it's very important that our the organizations that are doing that type of work should be recognized. But what we're focusing is on the long-term and sustainable project. So since last year, we partnered up with a donor that supported 9 community gardens throughout the country.
That's really great.
No, they've done amazing work. We've actually just wrapped up the final one in the Western Cape on Mandela Day.
Oh.
So 1 in each province. Community.
Oh, 9 as in 9 provinces.
9 provinces, 1 in each province. But apart from that, many other corporates, many other donors have come on board
through
and have further capacitated and supported other community gardens.
Oh, that's really great.
In fact, I'll be going to Limpopo before the end of this year's Mandela month, July, and we'll be wrapping up 3 food gardens at ECD centers. And providing that. So the work just keeps on coming in, and we work with communities that are established. So in other words, there's some form of gardening activity happening already. We come in, We consult with the community to find out what their needs are.
What they need.
How do we take it further? And on that basis, then we provide that. That's what we raise funds for. We provide those needs, so whether it be a water solution, more seedlings, fencing, because sometimes...
Whichever assistance they might be in need of.
Because communities might have domestic animals.
Yes.
Roaming the area.
So sometimes they'll need vets to come through and check them out and...
all those types of things. So that's the support that we provide. So on the 18th of July this year, we're in Diepsloot. There's a beautiful food garden that Africa Takun runs.
All right.
And mostly dealing with young people that have finished off their education.
Their education.
Unable to find work. And so these young people are actually working the land, literally. And in turn processing their food, selling it. So we provided some assistance, providing seedlings and trees, as well as the processing materials and equipment that is required to further their work.
Oh,
so
indeed.
that's the type of stuff.
Indeed, the NMF is doing a lot of great work.
Thank you.
It's doing a lot of great work. So, but tell me, because I think it's more than 2 decades now that the NMF has been established. Can you really say that you have conscientized the society and people in general about the actual vision and message that Utata wanted to send out of philanthropy, of giving out, of helping, of giving a helping hand?
Yes and no.
To a certain extent.
Yes, from the perspective that this year in particular we saw a massive uptake globally of Nelson Mandela International Day. I think that's something that I should have mentioned as well, is the fact that we also had a very global focus this year. So we had support in China. There was participation in China, in the Middle East, in London, throughout the African continent. In fact, I'm going from east to west. And then, of course, North America as well as Latin America. Some really amazing, and all of that material is coming in the video material, the videos that people have done. All of that, of them capacitating various like food gardens and planting trees.
Things that they've been doing.
It was a massive global event this year.
It's quite amazing.
But I think we need to prefix the fact that prior to that, we had the global pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. And as I said, when people are losing jobs and their businesses are being shut down, all too often we look to ourselves first before we
look at other people.
And but I think that two things are happening, is that there's a greater understanding in the need for long-term and sustainable interventions and programs as opposed to short-term charitable works. Number one. Number two, that there is a reigniting of the imagination around the likes of Mandela Day. I
guess the way you're saying it, and with the entire world participating, it shows that indeed the vision of Tata is now coming into play, and a lot of people are participating in it, and a lot of people are actually touching other people's lives as he would have loved to see the world turning out to be.
Exactly, and I think that's the mandate he gave us, isn't it? That's the job that he ultimately gave us, is for all of us to, in some shape or form, have a positive impact on this within the societies that we live in. It's not always easy. Sometimes it's a bit misguided. But I think the idea behind it is that we try to, and I mean, one of the key things, this is the 10th anniversary since Tata's passing. And in fact, our slogan across the NMF for this year is, the legacy lives on through you.
True.
And it's that notion that it's not, Madiba's not here to live out his legacy, to give us, to make it happen. It's up to you, me, and everyone else, including the foundation.
To make sure that his legacy actually lives on.
Exactly.
Oh, that's really amazing. That's really amazing. You know, the socio-economic state of our country is quite not appealing, not good. It's actually bad. So what has, other than the projects that the NMF has been doing and the other programs that the NMF does to assist your gardens and all of those things, what else do you guys do?
I think the key thing for us is, I think everything is based on our board's focus on poverty and inequality and dealing with those. I think it would be very difficult for us to say that we will eradicate poverty, that we will eradicate inequality, but I think that we can definitely take a step in dealing with those persisting issues, especially within the South African context. So all of our work is built on the foundation of that premise. We also have our advocacy and dialogue team working in the ECD space, not just building ECD centers, but actually impacting the ECD space. As you know, we have a serious issue around education in this country. I think that education is so much bigger than just sort of passing off information to children or to young people or to learners. It actually plays a role in terms of making sure that they are fed, making sure that they have a safe space to be, during the day. And that's where our interventions come in, where our advocacy and dialogue team has actually done amazing work in making sure that they're assisting ECD centers in not only getting constructed but also getting registered, making sure that those ECD centers are able to access grants, to make sure that those young people are then able to get not just a quality education but quality food, quality safety within their particular environment. So that is but one example. We have an archives team that specifically looks after all of the materials that we've collected over the years pertaining to Madiba. From letters dating back to his prison years all the way through to, some of his writings as president at the foundation.
So the general public can have access to that.
Indeed. People come through all the time and they can take a lovely walk through our exhibition space. In fact, we also have an exhibition that changes regularly. The last exhibition, at the moment, we have these beautiful photos up, with explainers of what those photos are,
what was happening, the background behind it.
But prior to that, we had a beautiful one where it was a virtual reality tour that you basically take. You put on the glasses and you hear the voices of Madiba and Walter Sisulu in court during the Rivonia trial, whilst watching this animation of the actual trial. And as you turn your head, you see the
you can see everything that's there.
Wow,
that's really nice.
And that's really to make sure that we keep the memory of Madiba alive. That it's not something that becomes legend and folktale, but that we can actually stick true to the history.
See it happening, and
So I think that the Nelson Mandela Foundation is very broad in its approach, and really in not just preserving the memory of Madiba, but also then making sure we're executing on the vision of the world that he had.
That's amazing. That's great. So we're taking it now with all the work that the NMF has been doing since its inception to today. Going forward, what's planned?
How long is a piece of string? I think that for one thing that the Nelson Mandela Foundation needs to, that we keep in top of mind is that we need to respond to the needs and the wants of the world on an ongoing basis.
True.
It's 1994, 1990, 1994, 1999 is a very different world to the year 2023.
Absolutely.
Here we are discussing climate change and food security, which might not have been top of mind in 1994.
At that time,
because political freedom was the issue at stake. Giving people the right to vote, making sure that people have the right to equality, the right to dignity.
Being conscientized, yes.
Exactly, that was his mandate at the time. Up until 1999, building that foundation for socioeconomic growth and development that then passes on to ordinary members of society. That was Madiba's mandate at the time. But here in the year 2023, in as much as that work still needs to continue, we're also facing new threats,
new problems.
Concerns. And so it's really for the Nelson Mandela Foundation to make sure that it keeps its finger on the pulse. I know it sounds like a cliche, but we need to keep our finger on the pulse to make sure that we are responsive and appropriately so. And I think the other thing that the Nelson Mandela Foundation recognizes is our convening power, meaning that we can put people around the table and have discussions, difficult discussions around these issues, and make sure that we address those as well.
That's really amazing. And with all that said, what are some of the challenges that the foundation has been encountering?
Again, I guess it goes back to the global COVID-19 pandemic, where funding has obviously, been under severe strain.
True.
Part of it is where we had very generous benefactors. A lot of those benefactors had to in turn cut costs. Take a step.
It became a bit difficult.
Exactly. And so I guess that's the one challenge that's persistent. because the more money you have, the more work you're able to do.
The more you're able to assist as well.
So I think that is probably the single largest one. Another challenge that I think we're overcoming is the buy-in and the global imagination around Mandela Day. I think that is being reignited there. I think that there's
Because now there's a lot of participation. There's a lot of people that are taking it more seriously.
And apart from that, I mean, we have to, again, taking us back to the fact that it's a decade since Madiba's passing.
True.
You know, the Nelson Mandela Foundation was really built around almost an individual, right? Being Tata himself. But the fact of the matter is that I think now we're understanding that it's about, or globally, there's an understanding it's about his legacy, it's about
The
continuing
vision.
his work. That all of us, in some shape or form, need to carry that baton. And I think there's greater buy-in into that notion. Hence why we're able to overcome that particular challenge.
Oh, great. Awesome. Indeed. Challenges are being overcame.
We try.
True,
We try
yeah.
on a day-to-day basis.
So for normal South Africans, do you think that the NMF is reaching to those and it's not only meant for the elite or a particular sector of people?
Definitely not. I mean, as I said, we work within communities and we work with ordinary members of society, you know, in townships, in rural areas across this country. I think for me, the most important thing is that for ordinary people, how they can participate, how they can contribute to all of this, is that it's not just about, you know, donations or money to the
But
Nelson
actual
Mandela
participation.
Foundation. Exactly. And I always tell people that even our program now, looking at climate change and its intersection with food security, is that ultimately you're not just doing it for some imaginary community.
No,
that's
it's actual
struggling out
people
there.
who are there, who are struggling, actual citizens.
Exactly, but you're doing it for yourself as well. By planting those trees, by planting, we're encouraging home-based gardens. So in other words, Kwena, you as well, who one can label as middle class, and go start your own food garden.
There's no need for me to go buy tomatoes if I can grow them in my backyard.
Exactly. And how much are you saving in the process?
So
and
much.
how much are you giving back to the environment? Especially if you're applying techniques and strategies that help build the environment as opposed to destroy the environment. And we're not doing this for the sake of someone else only. Yes, we are.
But even for ourselves.
We're also benefiting from, because that tree that you planted, you can't say, hey, you know, those people over there,
They're going to breathe.
Are the only ones getting the oxygen. You're breathing
Absolutely.
in the
All
rays
of us
oxygen.
benefit from that.
Exactly.
I think that's great. We need to build more gardens. We need to start more gardens in societies, individually. There's so many different techniques that are there
Definitely.
to make sure that, I think, food security, I think a lot of us are still a bit quaky on it, but there's so much that we can do.
I mean, I come from a generation where we grew up in the township. There was always a veggie patch in the backyard. You
Your
know.
spinach is growing there in the backyard. Your tomatoes are there
All
in
the
the
way to
backyard.
Millis. All the way to Millis, you know. But now, obviously, we understand because of rapid urbanization, those backyard gardens or home-based gardens have been replaced by shacks, by
Yes, true.
apartments, by you know, cottages, and where people stay and rent.
New developments.
Which is needed. It's urbanization, but at the very same time, if we can go back to those fundamentals of being able to feed yourself, sustain yourself, turning our townships from sort of having a brown base in terms of the ground to being green, providing safe spaces as parks for young children to benefit and grow in, and, you know, play in, making sure that we start reintroducing greenery, that we see green all over. One of the key things that always stands out for me is that we refer to Johannesburg as the world's largest urban forest. It might be the case, but it's only the world's largest urban forest in some parts. Because if you go
Absolutely.
to our townships, it's not as green. There's not as many trees.
True.
I always tell people, I don't know, I can't tell you from the top of my head how many trees I have in my own yard. I can't because I've lost count.
There's just so many.
But I live in a neighborhood where that is sort of standard. And we need to start moving it into other areas.
Making sure
as well.
that other areas are like that as
Exactly.
well. And so talking about making our communities more greener, you don't necessarily need soil or land or anymore. There's this new thing called hydroponic farming. I think a lot of people, if they go into that and think about it, I think we could also get a lot of greens out there.
In fact, some of our projects is based on
hydroponics.
And then there's another layer to it, aquaponics, which
Yes.
involves fish. And I don't know what the fish do, but somehow they benefit the soil. But I mean, there's many options, and I think that's a great thing about technological developments, about creativity, about thinking about these things, and how do we, people who live in those apartment
In
buildings
modern,
that you talk about,
yes.
they've started little veggie patches, whether it's in the balconies, in their windowsills. There's many possibilities.
Oh, it's amazing. So, how do we get a hold of the NMF? How do people be in contact with you guys, or if they want to participate or assist, or however, how do they get in contact with you?
Very simple. They always say when you want to give people your details, keep it short and sharp. 2 websites, www.nelsonmandela.org,
Okay.
www.mandeladay.com. Those are the 2 websites that you visit. You'll find all of our other details there, whether it be social
Media platforms, numbers,
telephone
emails.
numbers, emails, etc. That's how you can get a hold of us. So very quickly, it's www.nelsonmandela.org. That's the one website, and then obviously Mandela Day is www.mandeladay.com.
Oh, awesome. Amazing. And what would you say on this very beautiful Mandela Month to the youth of South Africa and the world?
It's ironic that you're asking me that question. I just had this conversation on Friday. It is in your hands. It's our call to action. It is in your hands. Participate. Be an active member of society. That way we start making the necessary changes. So take charge of your circumstances.
Vuka uzenzele.
That was it.
Yeah. I think that's really good. I think a lot of our viewers and a lot of young people will take that and absolutely participate. Start, however, be in contact with you and get as much assistance as we can and make a difference, change lives, because it's definitely in our hands.
I can't do better than that.
Thank you so much. My name is Kwena Molekoa, and we've been having a nice and great conversation with Gashwell Brooks from the Nelson Mandela Foundation. Look, there's so much that we're doing. There's so much that the Nelson Mandela Foundation is doing. Keep your head up high and vuka uzenzele. Let's meet right here, right now. Bye.